This meeting is being recorded.
Alrighty, guys. Hello and welcome. My name is Lily Kathleen. First name Lily, middle name Kathleen. I've been called Lily or Kathleen. It doesn't really matter. That's why you might be confused. And yeah, we've got a very exciting presentation today. I'll keep the chat open to interact with you guys throughout it. I am recording this, and if I end up posting this on YouTube, just know that this is one of our live coaching calls that we have from our free community, not my private one-to-one coaching. So if you're not in the free community already and you'd like to come to these other calls that are incredibly valuable, that have a whole ton of more resources other than just, the videos I post on YouTube, then this is your invitation to definitely join that. I'll leave the link below to join the free community. So let's get started, guys. In this one, we're going to talk about the food industry in particular, and talk about cravings and why some foods are absolutely impossible to resist, whereas others, they're kind of easy, right? With the majority of people I've worked with so far, which is over 150 ex-athletes, emotional eating, binge eating, restriction, cheat meals, cravings, cheat days, it all leads to this inconsistency. It leads to doubt. It leads to sometimes self-sabotage. It leads to you feeling guilty or shameful. And in today's presentation, I really want to reiterate to you that it's not your fault. I'm serious. It's genuinely not your fault. Because likelihood is what we're going to run through today, you've never been taught in your entire life. However, it is your responsibility, okay? Same with being overweight or whatever injuries, whatever it is that you struggle with. It most likely isn't your fault, but it is your responsibility to get back to the most optimal level of health, okay? So same with this. With cravings and why you can't tend to stop at one bite. For example, you open a packet of chips. You can't just eat half the packet or a couple of chips. No, you got to eat the entire thing. Whatever that food is, maybe you can't eat just one square of chocolate. You've got to have half the bar or the whole bar. Like, why can't you stop at one bite? That is what we're going to uncover today. What makes certain foods very addictive, learn how these foods affect your brain and your body. And thirdly, discover simple tools to observe your own eating habits, okay? Now, in the chat below, I want you to list right now what food stood out to you the most. Forget the words, just what food stood out to you the most out of the images. Cheese, cheese, cheese. Cookies. A lot of cheese. Pizza, someone said. Someone asked, where am I based? I am Australian. My accent's a bit weird because I lived overseas for a lot of my life, being an athlete. But I am based in Australia. However, 99% of my clients are American. They are based in the US. It actually works really well because it's like the morning for me when it's your nighttime and you guys usually work. So I'm able to actually contact you and communicate with you perfectly. Most, since most of you aren't just sitting at home all day, except if you're on vacation. I know it's vacation for you guys right now. All right, cool. Okay, so moving on. What are addictive foods? Addictive foods are essentially, described by ultra-processed, very high in sugar, fat, and salt. And they can trigger very impulsive or compulsive eating behaviors, okay? Now, with reference to this, we could talk about like fast food as well. I might make a different video, a different live coaching call about fast food particularly. But I'm just talking about particular types of food in this presentation, okay? But fast food does kind of fall under this category. On the left, you see the top contenders: chocolate ice cream, cheese ice cream, blah, 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 right? Out of those top contenders, I want you to understand that chocolate is the most addictive. And then down the list goes the least addictive. However, they're all still very addictive. This is generalized based on the data that, our society has. However, I want you to list off in the chat right now 2 or 3 of your most addictive foods, or the foods that you love or like the most from that list. Okay, because even though chocolate out of the whole, data research is the most common one, it doesn't mean that it's the most common one for you. You might be a lolly person instead, I know for me, so let's see in the chat now. I know for me, I love cookies, especially if they're a little bit like gooey and soft in the middle. It makes me want to go like buy cookie dough right now, chop it up into slices and put it in the oven. Not even joking. I am in a lean bulk right now, so I might do that. I also don't mind cheese. Hey, I do love my cheese. All right, someone said, yeah, good point. So someone said soft drinks, but the ones with caffeine. So those energy drinks like Monsters, V's. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A lot of people live off those. Someone said French fries from McDonald's. Yep. Someone said cheese, any cheese. Yeah. Okay. So if you haven't popped in the chat already, your 2 or 3 most addictive foods, do it, because it's going to help bring value to you individually throughout this conversation. All right. So understanding these are the most addictive foods, and why we can't resist them. Yeah, that's the main takeaway here. And I want you to take away your most common addictive foods from this. Got it? Cool. Moving on. Why are they so addictive? So if you look at the right, we have a dopamine chart. Okay. In this dopamine chart, dopamine is a hormone or a chemical, whatever you want to call it, that makes you feel really good. Most of us know what dopamine is. Most of us are addicted to our phone because it releases dopamine. Videos release dopamine. Drugs release dopamine, or most drugs, maybe alcohol, like whatever makes you feel good. Exercise releases dopamine too. Okay. There's a lot of different forms of dopamine, right? But on this chart, we have cheap dopamine. And that is exactly what these addictive foods release. Cheap dopamine, fast dopamine spikes, and then very drastic dopamine drops, which is the blue line. The yellow line, on the other hand, shows you earned dopamine. And an example would be exercise. You earn that dopamine and you feel, I know for me, I always get on this like hormonal high after exercise. Like, I'm not even kidding. I'm so sensitive towards exercise. Maybe it's because I just love it so much and I just really love progressing in my body and my physique. It's something I'm genuinely passionate about for myself, let alone others. And so I really do feel the dopamine and the other hormones released after exercise. Like, I genuinely do. However, it's not as much of a spike in comparison to the blue line. However, it, like, the longevity of that dopamine exists for a longer period of time, has a slight drop, but the baseline is more extensive. Okay. So what we want to understand with these foods is that we have a dopamine spike whenever we eat the chocolate, the lollies, the ice cream, the cheese, whatever it is. Okay. And these foods essentially trigger the brain's reward system. And we have lots of different kinds of rewards, types of reward systems in our brain. But the primary one I want to focus on with you guys today is the feel-good chemical called dopamine. That is literally the brain's reward system, okay? And we have the brain's reward system triggered when we finish exercise as well. However, because the reward system is associated with cheap dopamine, it is triggered to the point where that cheap dopamine is just, the dopamine is just spiked up a lot. And we'll get into the more science side of it, the nutritional science side of it in a second. So that's one thing to understand why they are so addictive, because the dopamine is so high, right? Secondly, fat and sugar combination. So the combination of processed fat and processed sugars, not whole food fats and whole food sugars. For example, I literally have a bowl of oats here that has frozen berries in it that I'm waiting to kind of defrost. That has healthy fats, okay? It also has healthy sugars in it. That is not going to override my satiety cues. It's actually going to bring me a sense of true satiety, which means feeling satiated and full and satisfied. However, if I have, let's just say, something fatty and sugary like a chocolate bar, the combination of that, it's literally designed to override the satiety cues, and therefore you don't feel satiated, you don't feel full, okay? Third thing to understand as to why they are so addictive is conditioned responses. And what I mean by this is we have our five senses: see, feel, hear, taste, and smell, okay? So certain foods will smell a certain way. Chicken nuggets, chicken tenders, whatever, they have that smell, right? Chips in a bag, they have that crinkling sound, okay? And visuals, which we'll get into in a second, like the colors of the food, the texture that you can see, whatever it is, they trigger cravings due to learned associations. So when we look at these foods, I want you to think back to those 2 or 3 addictive foods that you mentioned in the chat. And I want you to take one of them, let's just say it's lollies, and I want you to think back to the earliest memory you have as to when you learned an association with lollies, okay? Was it, for example, after you got an injection, like a whatever kind of injection from a doctor, and the doctor gave you a lollipop, and that was your reward system? Or was it associated with birthday parties as a kid, and so you associate it with some sort of like celebration? I don't know, whatever, okay? I want you to think back right now to just one of them, use one as an example. What is your earliest memory as to your association to them, okay? And basically, you can comment it in the chat, but long story short, all of these foods are associated with something to you personally. Because of the society we live in, most of us have engaged with these foods multiple times as a young kid, as a young adult, as an adult, okay? And so these learned associations are like neural pathways in our brain that have been ingrained and ingrained and ingrained and ingrained every single time we eat the food, right? Which also makes it so addictive, okay? I know for me, lollies were a birthday party thing. I was never allowed lollies as a kid. Our treat as a kid was sultanas. Yeah. And so, you know, they were associated with someone's birthday party, right? And cake was something I only ever saw for when it was a birthday party, when it was like this celebratory thing where there were multiple people around. If it was my birthday and there was no one really involved and it was just my family, guess what my only special thing was? Mango sorbet. That was like my special thing. And my special dinner was fried rice. Yeah, okay. We all come from different environments, okay? That's just my example. And that's why I associate lollies with something very celebratory, like a kid's birthday, and cake associated with a very like large group celebration of a birthday, okay? That's just my example. You might associate ice cream with vacations, right? You might associate cookies that your mom used to cook at home for you, and it gives you that homely, you know, home family grounded feeling, whatever, okay? I want you to really think about that, because you can listen to me, but if you actually take notes and take action on the things that I'm teaching you, you're actually going to change your actions, behaviors. It's actually going to help you, okay? All right, moving on. So they're learned associations. We understand the 3 things there: dopamine spike, fat and sugar combo, and conditioned responses. Yes? Can I get a thumbs up if you understand those 3? That's a lot of thumbs up. Okay. So last one is understanding the food industry's role in this. All right. Now, the food industry, especially these like chips, ice cream, lollies, pizza companies, we could talk about fast food as well. Those companies, these are multi-billion dollar companies, a lot of them, if not multi-million dollar companies. So they have a lot of money to invest in understanding the human psychology. All right. And they know that is the way to get you to buy and then buy again and then buy again and then buy again and buy again. Right. So we have these three factors that I want to educate you about. One is the bliss point. Okay. The bliss point is when a food or a snack is engineered and it perfectly hits the combination of sugar, fat, and salt. The perfect combination. Now, I'll tell you a little story. I had an auntie who used to work at Dara Lee, which is this chocolate company that it used to be quite big and now it's not as big. And essentially, part of her job was taste testing chocolate. And she would always say how the chocolate that had a little bit more salt in it always tasted so much better, right? That's just an example. Every single food scientist, when their responsibility is to create irresistible snacks, they are trying to hit that perfect bliss point of sugar, fat, and salt, okay? We also have additives like MSG, artificial flavors, artificial colors, textures, just to make you want more. Have you ever thought why Smith chips are crinkle cut, whereas Rock Red Deli chips are thin and kind of like gourmet looking, right? Even the packaging gives you this like gourmet kind of feel, right? Have you ever considered why Smarties or M&Ms, even though every single Smartie and every single M&M tastes the same, they're different colors? Have you ever considered that? Have you ever considered why strawberry ice cream looks pink, even though there's fuck all strawberries in it? And the thing that's making it pink is artificial colors, right? Have you ever considered why a vanilla donut has white icing on it, whereas a chocolate donut has, brown icing on it, right? Makes sense. We could even go down to the very colors of, for example, there's I can't see exactly what it is in the background, but there's a bar that's yellow and orange. Have you ever considered why Dr. Pepper is red and black? Okay, not red and green. What does red and green make you think of? Christmas? That means that like they would only sell at Christmas time, right? Have you ever considered why Sunkiss, that sugary orange drink, is orange? Because it tastes like orange, so the can's orange, right? Have you ever considered why they put carbonated like water or carbonate in soft drinks? Have you ever considered why when you open a can it goes tss, it's like so satisfying, and it's on all of the ads that you watch on TV that happens, right? It's there for a reason. This is marketing to target your emotions. Nostalgia, like, sounds like so relaxing, like, oh, right, and convenience as well. So all of this is put in to make you buy and make you keep buying and literally make you addicted to it, okay? Let's talk about the cycle of craving. So we have a craving, then we eat the craving, then we have a dopamine hit, then we have a dopamine crash, and then we crave it again, right? That's the narrative going on here. This essentially leads to emotional eating, energy crashes, guilt, shame, maybe the self-sabotaging cycle, where you just give up and you overeat and you feel even more guilty and whatever, okay? In this example, I'm going to use sugar. Let's just say you crave sugar. You're really like craving sugar today, right? I always tell my clients, a craving is when you can literally pinpoint what you're craving. I'm craving something sugary. I'm craving something salty. I'm craving something fatty. If you can't pinpoint at least that, you don't have a craving. You're just hungry, okay? So next time, if you struggle with like the differentiation between hunger and craving, I want you to sit there and be like, okay, am I hungry? Or can I actually, like, particularly in my own mind, determine what I feel like? Okay. Now with cravings, let's just say you crave something sugary. The best clients and people who learn to overcome this, they're able to identify, if I'm craving something sugary, I'm actually craving cake, or I'm craving chocolate, or I'm craving lollies. Like, what exactly of the sugar department are you craving? That's where the real healing begins with that. But anyway, that's a different topic. Let's just say you crave sugar. You eat sugar. Obviously, processed sugar has addictive properties in it. And so does whatever that sugary snack is. It has other addictive properties in it. What happens is your blood sugar spikes because dopamine is released in the brain. Sugar is released in your bloodstream, right? And that high blood sugar releases dopamine in a very high amount in the brain. And then insulin is forced to be secreted in a huge mass amount to combat that blood sugar spike. And then what happens is now you have this huge blood sugar crash because it's a very like high GI form of sugar, high on the glycemic index scale. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's okay. But long story short, then your blood sugar crashes. And then because of the high insulin release, now insulin is caused to turn the sugar into immediate fat storage. Okay. And then the body craves the lost sugar and that dopamine high. And so you have the hunger and the cravings and low blood sugar levels. And then you need to eat sugar again. And that's how the cycle goes on in the most simple way I could ever possibly explain it. Can I get a thumbs up if that makes sense? Yeah, cool. All right. Now, to finish off here, this looks boring, okay? But I really want you to listen up. Processed foods activate brain regions of your brain, parts of your brain, very similar to drugs, okay? I don't say this to make you feel bad. I say this to tell you the truth. As a coach, I'm always going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, okay? It's kind of a very similar pathway, right? Now, in this example, in this study, a person went in an MRI scanning device, right? And they did a study. So basically they got the patient, client, whatever, prospect, to fast overnight where they didn't eat anything. And when they woke up in the morning, they went and got their brain scanned. And then after they got their brain scanned, they had that image on the left of the red regions of the amygdala. But anyway, that you don't need to understand that. Then they had this UPF milkshake. I don't know what UPF stands for, but maybe you guys do. Just a milkshake. Then 30 minutes after consuming the milkshake, they got their brain scanned again. And you can see how now that region of the brain has really lit up a lot, all right? And that is what is chemically happening in your head when you have these kinds of foods, all right? So studies have literally showed, this is one example, but multiple studies have literally showed how high sugar or high fatty foods that are very processed, it leads to a loss of control and binge eating behaviors. And this is scientifically why. Now we have a chemical in this example that was particularly studied called raclopride. Okay, that's the chemical that's released from these regions of the brain, or a chemical, all right, without getting too scientific. And the red at the very bottom shows the percent change. So we could have a negative percent, like a drop in that, or an increased percent where it's increased more. We also have the change in this percentage, which is completely unrelated to adiposity, which is adipose tissue, which is fat tissue. Okay, what this is related to is not gaining fat. What it is related to in this study, to make it very clear, is the chemical released in your brain that activates a very similar region that is very similar to drugs, okay? It's just describing this on a much deeper level, okay? Now, across the bottom, we have the number of participants, okay? There are around 50 participants in this study, all right? And on the left, we have that chemical percentage in red, right? Which is going from negative 10% all the way up to 50%. And then we have the BMI, right? The basically like the state of health of this person or the different people. Now, what you'll be able to see, if you look on the very far left at that bar, the BMI of the person on the very far left isn't as high as the person on the very far right, okay? And that person, after having the milkshake, actually had a drop in this percentage. Okay. And what this means is essentially this person isn't that addicted to sugary, sugary foods. It's not that addicted to milkshakes. Okay. Because it actually had a drop. So someone like myself, who the last time they had a McDonald's shake was probably when they were like, I don't know, 9 or something, I'm probably going to have a very similar response. I'm not addicted to it. I don't think about milkshakes. I don't think about McDonald's. Like, it just doesn't go across my mind. Okay. And so if I had that, it wouldn't actually trigger these reward cues and the chemicals. If anything, it would actually drop that, because what makes me feel good, what has been wired in my brain to make me feel good, is something like this. Okay, right? Now, mind you, I was an athlete, a professional athlete from like a very young age. I had dietitians and nutritionists. I had it ingrained in me. Okay, not many people have that privilege. All right. Now, on the far right, we have the person whose BMI is a lot higher. All right, and the chemical release in their brain was actually increased. The addictive chemical was actually increased quite a lot, like by almost 50%, probably like 48%. Right. And so what you can see here is your weight doesn't necessarily reflect whether you are addicted to foods or not. Okay. Because someone else who was basically the same weight had a drop in that percentage change. Okay. But what it does show is that regardless of your weight, I've met some people who were underweight, who binged and overate and had anemia and anorexia and were bulimic and whatever. Sorry, not anemic, were anorexic or bulimic, right? And they had the same issues with food. They were addicted to foods too. Okay. So this has nothing to do with whether you're overweight or not. What it has to do with is the fact that you could have an addictive pathway in your brain that is very similar to drugs, because you have ate these sugary, fatty, salty, high processed foods. You've been sold into this bliss point, the food industry, for a very long time, and the pathways are just super strong in your brain. Okay, so this could happen to someone who's underweight. This could happen to someone who's at a healthy weight. This could also happen to someone who is overweight. Okay, now, majority of the time I'm helping people lose weight, but it doesn't mean that they necessarily struggle with, these things. However, in my opinion, from the people I've coached, it is more common. Hope that makes sense. All right. Do we have any questions about that? Someone was like, wow, that was so in depth. Yes. Okay. So some tools I think I was meant to write break the gap, but grip kind of made sense. Anyway, I'm a human being. I have typos. Mindful eating, right? Protein rich and fiber rich meals to reduce cravings, because high protein and high fiber rich like this, there's protein powder in it, right? That will keep me full and satiated, and therefore will reduce my cravings. When you eat balanced meals, you should have a reduction in cravings. Thirdly, reducing trigger food exposure. So if you have those chips at eye level in the pantry, or those cookies at eye level in the pantry, chances are you're going to struggle to not eat them. Whereas if they're at the top of the pantry where you can't see them, then you're reducing the trigger food exposure. The ice cream in the freezer, put it in the freezer that's in the garage. Then you're reducing your likelihood to be exposed to it or see it. Swapping healthy alternatives as well. My goodness, I've been speaking so much today. Anyway, so like a Snickers bar versus a raw Snickers bar made of dates, cacao, cashews, whatever. The healthier version is probably higher in calories in this example. However, it's going to keep you fuller for longer, and it's not made of this like processed sugar, right? We also have zero sugar lemonade versus lemonade. We also have full sugar Dr. Pepper versus zero sugar Dr. Pepper. There's always healthy alternatives, okay? And lastly, creating a pause between the cravings and the action. So let's just say you're craving something, like, oh my God, I'm on my period, I'm craving that chocolate cake right now, like, right? I always crave chocolate when I'm on my period. Pause. Sit with the craving. Now, did I just go from talking really quickly to all of a sudden pausing? and realized I was talking really quickly because I was getting passionate. And that's something I do. Yes. And that's the same thing with cravings, right? Your mind's going, oh. And then if you just sit, breathe, try and identify what the craving is. Okay, what might have caused this craving for me? Am I stressed? Am I on my period? Am I addicted to chocolate and I have that chocolate every day and therefore I'm craving it because I haven't had my chocolate sugar hit today? And that awareness before taking the action might help you make a better decision, not by necessarily not having the chocolate or the chocolate cake, by, for example, having half a slice of the chocolate cake alongside, I don't know, some strawberries or something that would just make it a healthier meal or a healthier snack, right? Like it's better to have half a chocolate cake and some strawberries than a whole chocolate cake or a whole slice of a chocolate cake, right? It's better to have a couple squares of a chocolate bar alongside some strawberries rather than the whole chocolate bar. Okay. And those little changes really do add up because the whole foods, obviously, majority of the time, particularly like, strawberries or watermelon, we can talk about that in another video. Likelihood is they're lower in calories than the ultra processed food, right? And so something that helps with weight loss is high volume, but also healing your relationship with food, which is what we're doing today in terms of, teaching you the things that you didn't know. Now, comment in the chat if you learned something today that you didn't already know. A lot of people are saying they didn't even know what a bliss point was. Yep, Brett said yeah, for sure, Brett. Yep, so Brett said, for those of you who are watching the recording, how basically he wrote quite a paragraph, but basically he was explaining how he's never really sat down and thought about why foods are marketed or packaged a certain way, why they look a certain way, and that really like hit home for him. Yeah, awesome, guys. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to leave it here for today. I have to jump onto a meeting in 60 seconds. But yeah, if you, got value from this and you're watching it from YouTube, hit the like button. And if you do want to have a chat with myself directly to see if you're a good fit, see if we could help you. Basically, if we can help you, we would use that chat to map out a game plan for you. Worst case scenario, you're not a good fit and I put you in the direction of something that might help you. Sorry, talking really fast because I need to jump to my meeting. You can book that in via the link below. Essentially, you have to go through an application process first before you can book in that free chat with me, just so that I don't waste my time, obviously, and I don't want you to waste your time either. So there is a bit of an application process. So I'll leave the link to my website below, and it's very obvious as to how to book in the chat from there. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys. Hope you're enjoying the free community. Can I just get a thumbs up as to who's enjoying this free community? Yeah. Who thought it was like a lot more? Who was surprised by the value in it as well? Someone was like, thankfully it wasn't another free community where you're just trying to sell something. No, if anything, like full transparency, if anything, if you get so much value from it, and then you actually like see that I know what I'm talking about and you trust me because I know what online coaching can seem like, it's up to you to book in a chat. It's up to you to make a decision moving forwards. That's on you. People come to me, to be honest. Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, thanks, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.